Why is India's normally confident Prime Minister suddenly begging his people to buy less gold and travel less? I'm Felix. Welcome to Felix Feel World. India has already entered the scorching heat early in May, with temperatures hitting 45 degrees Celsius. But Prime Minister Modi's heart is ice cold. Why? Because he's facing the worst crisis since he took office. On May 10th, Modi gave a televised speech with a heavy face. He didn't mention the Indian century he used to talk about all the time. Instead, he begged Indians to use less oil, buy less gold, travel abroad less, and stay with him through tough times. Right after the speech, Modi started a special forces-style diplomatic tour. In 6 days, he visited 5 countries: the UAE, the Netherlands, Sweden, Norway, and Italy. Everywhere he went, he bowed and scraped, asking for help. So why is Modi, who's usually so weirdly confident, in such a hurry this time? The answer is simple. India's exchange rate collapsed. May has not been kind to India. Last May, they lost badly in an air battle. This May, they're facing a foreign exchange crisis. By May 16th, the Indian rupee against the US dollar broke through the historic 96 mark, dropping more than 15%, making it the worst performing currency in Asia. What does that mean? It means that even though India's absolute GDP is still growing, if you convert it into US dollars, GDP actually shrank by 15%. To save the rupee, India's central bank has been frantically selling dollars and buying rupees in the market over the past few months. But that only slowed down the rupee's freefall a bit, without changing the trend. Why? Because India's foreign exchange reserves are too small. They don't dare sell openly to save the exchange rate. On the surface, India seems to have plenty of foreign exchange. According to the central bank, India's reserves are a full $700 billion, nearly 30 times Pakistan's. But this nearly $700 billion can't stand up to close scrutiny. How did China get its $3.3 trillion in reserves? It came from hundreds of millions of Chinese people working hard in foreign trade, earning it through trade surpluses. That's real liquid cash. But India, a big chunk of its reserves is just paper profits blown up. India's foreign exchange reserves are not all foreign currency. They also include gold, about 880 tons of it. If this were 2024, that gold would be worth only $66 billion. But now, because gold prices have gone up, it's worth over $150 billion. That means India's reserves increased by over $80 billion without doing anything. Sounds like good news, but the problem is, can gold be used like foreign currency? No. Gold holds its value, but its liquidity is totally different from the US dollar. The US dollar can be turned into cash instantly at any bank or trade market in any country. You can use it to buy oil, buy chips, pay off debt, intervene in exchange rates. Transfers and settlements have zero obstacles. But gold? Physical gold settlement is extremely slow. Large gold transactions require vault transfers, assaying, and delivery procedures, which are very troublesome, and you can't directly use it to pay bills or repay debts. What's the core role of foreign exchange reserves? It's so that when a country falls into a foreign exchange crisis, the central bank can immediately take out cash to stabilize the market. You can't wait until the fire is burning your eyebrows, then slowly airlift gold to London for spot trading and mortgage borrowing, can you? Historically, in 1991, India had only $600 million in reserves and was about to go bankrupt. They did exactly that. But the IMF not only required gold as collateral, but also demanded open markets, tariff cuts, abolition of the license system, and rupee devaluation. That was eventually seen by Indians as the biggest national humiliation since independence. Besides that, the largest share of India's foreign exchange reserves is FCA, most of which is short-term hot money from foreign investors and corporate debt from abroad. This money came to India because India maintained very high interest rate spreads to suppress inflation and maintain the exchange rate. So international hot money converted US dollars into rupees, parked them in India to earn high interest, and speculated on India's stock market. That means this money doesn't belong to India at all. As soon as the Fed's policy changes slightly, or when the market shifts, this capital will immediately dump rupees, convert back to dollars, and pull out. For example, recently India slapped Apple with a sky-high fine of $38 billion, and also forced Apple to give a higher proportion of its contract manufacturing orders and profits to India's local conglomerate, the Tata Group. The result? It triggered a chilling effect among all foreign companies. They all slowed down their investment plans in India. Even Musk directly gave up on the superfactory project in India that had been hyped for a long time. If Apple and Tesla get treated like this, forget about smaller foreign companies. Out of fear, these foreign investors started dumping rupees, converting back to dollars, and packing up and leaving. Apple and Tesla gave up on India, not just because of the Indian government's problems, but also because India's infrastructure is really terrible, especially the power grid. Every summer during peak electricity demand, it often collapses, causing massive blackouts. To ensure residential power supply, the government has to impose mandatory power cuts on industrial users. Recently, India has been hit by continuous extreme heat. The temperature in Banda reached 47.6 degrees Celsius. To maintain basic production, many factories are forced to install industrial air coolers, misting fans, and even air conditioners. India's air conditioner penetration rate is extremely low. Most Indians can't afford ACs. They usually just cover themselves with a wet towel to sleep. Otherwise, they can't fall asleep. But facing a massive foreign capital exodus, what is India's central bank going to use to pay them off? That's the problem India is facing right now. According to data from India's National Securities Depository, in just the first few months of this year, foreign portfolio investors have already pulled out over 2.2 trillion rupees from India. That figure far exceeds last year's total and sets a new record for capital withdrawal in India's financial history. On one hand, foreign capital is frantically fleeing. On the other hand, India can't come up with enough foreign exchange. As a result, no surprise, the exchange rate collapsed. Some might say, isn't India still producing and exporting? That can create foreign exchange too. Can't they use the new foreign exchange to fill the hole? That's where a little known fact comes in. Even though Indians keep shouting about Make in India and talk about replacing China all the time, India is actually a complete deficit country. In the 2025 to 2026 fiscal year, India's total exports were $860 billion. Total imports were $979.4 billion. And the deficit was as high as $119.3 billion. Think that's a lot? Look at this year's data. In April of this year alone, India's deficit was a staggering $28.4 billion. What does that mean? It means India is losing nearly $1 billion in foreign exchange every single day. India has $700 billion in reserves, that's true. But after subtracting foreign debt, hot money, and gold that can't be easily touched, the actual US dollar cash that India can use at any time might be less than $200 billion. Facing a deficit of nearly $30 billion a month, that reserve can only last about half a year. Why has the deficit increased so fast? Part of the reason is the spillover effect of the US-Iran war. India is a typical oil-poor country. Over 85% of its crude oil needs to be imported. In recent years, India had been buying discounted Russian oil, which greatly reduced its energy costs and saved a lot of foreign exchange. But the problem started in January this year. To please the US, India drastically cut its purchases of Russian oil by more than 50% at one point and shifted the gap entirely to the Middle East. They had just bet on the Middle East for a month when the US-Iran war broke out and the Strait of Hormuz was blocked. India was stunned. India is different from China. China started building its own crude oil reserves back in the 1990s, with enough reserves to cover more than 200 days of needs. But India's crude oil reserves are only 3.37 million tons, enough for just 7 days of demand. The Middle East oil was cut off, and Russian oil couldn't be bought. The whole country fell into an oil shortage. Domestic oil prices surged by over 40%. Ordinary people are suffering terribly. If you don't believe me, go to the streets of New Delhi. The underlying people who make a living driving three-wheeled auto rickshaws can't even afford fuel anymore. And because urea production requires natural gas, India has even run out of fertilizer. A food crisis is about to happen. Now you know why Modi was in such a hurry to visit 5 countries in 6 days, right? His first stop was the UAE. Modi put on a very low posture. He outsourced oil reserve construction projects to the UAE and granted tariff exemptions on UAE LNG. The core demand behind all this was just one thing. After you leave OPEC, can you point-to-point give India some cheap crude oil? And can you agree to let India pay in rupees? Then, the European countries. Modi desperately painted a big picture for Europe about India's green energy transition and semiconductor investment. He just wanted to stabilize European investors' confidence, tell them not to pull out, that India still has a future. Another reason India is short on foreign exchange is Indians' bizarre obsession with gold. Many of you might remember a news story from a few years ago. In the Padmanabhaswamy temple in India, they discovered several tons of gold statues, over 1,200 gold chains weighing 2.5 kilograms each, plus diamonds, gold crowns, and treasures, valued at a total of $11.2 billion. Just from that one story, you can see how much Indians love gold. Historically, gold was seen as a symbol of the goddess Lakshmi. Low gold production was often monopolized by the upper castes, making gold a symbol of wealth and status that all Indians desperately wanted. Ordinary people might not even have enough to eat, but they would still borrow money from loan sharks to make a few dozen grams of gold jewelry for their daughter's wedding just to save face. However, India itself hardly produces any gold. Over 90% of the gold it consumes must be imported. What does that mean? It means that for every gram of gold an Indian buys, India has to use foreign exchange to buy it from the international market. In the 2026 fiscal year, due to domestic fanaticism consumption and the surge in international gold prices, India's gold import bill reached $72 billion. For a country that is already extremely short on foreign exchange, that's like a massive hemorrhage. If that money had been used to import machinery, the machines could produce goods domestically, create profits and jobs, and be worth it. But importing gold? What does that bring? People make gold bracelets and lock them in their cabinets at home. That turns into dead capital, just like the silver gourds that Chinese landlords used to cast. It doesn't circulate, doesn't generate any economic benefit. It simply turns the hard-earned US dollars that the country has saved into a lump of metal. Why was India's trade deficit so huge in April? Because April coincided with the Akshaya Tritiya festival, Hinduism believes that buying gold on this day brings lasting wealth, so gold imports surged. Now you know why Modi was begging people on TV not to buy gold? It's because buying gold consumes too much foreign exchange. So the dead end India is facing is this. The country must import oil and gold. The trade deficit widens. The rupee faces depreciation pressure. Foreign capital panics and flees. The central bank exhausts its reserves to stabilize the market. And in the end, the exchange rate still collapses. Modi is frantically running to the Middle East for oil and to Europe for investment. But can these tricks of political grandstanding and begging everywhere really patch things up? No. They don't work. Because the foreign exchange crisis in India's economy is not a temporary difficulty. It's because India's economic model itself can no longer function. Over the years, many people might have wondered, India is such a mess. Why do its economic numbers still look decent? The answer is simple. India's economic model relies on three pillars, using external gains to subsidize the domestic economy. These three pillars are reprocessing of Chinese raw materials, remittances from the Middle East for blood and sweat labor, and outsourcing from the US services sector. But the problem is, all three pillars have collapsed now. First, let's look at the reprocessing of Chinese raw materials. India itself admits that it is extremely dependent on China in 5 major product categories: pharmaceutical active pharmaceutical ingredients, APIs, electronic semiconductor components, photovoltaic core materials, chemical intermediates, and rare earth permanent magnets. Many people know about electronic semiconductor components. Today let's focus on pharmaceutical APIs. A few years ago, the movie Dying to Survive gave many Chinese a not so accurate impression of India, the world's pharmacy. India supplies medicine to the whole world. How could it be short on foreign exchange? But if you dig deeper, you'll find that the so-called Indian pharmaceutical industry is just a packaging workshop for China's chemical industry. There is a term in the medical field, API, the core ingredient that actually treats the disease in a pill. Over 70% of the APIs used by India's pharmaceutical industry are imported from China. For some basic drugs like penicillin, cephalosporin antibiotics, ibuprofen, and paracetamol, India's dependence on Chinese APIs exceeds 90%. Many people wonder, India is a big country, why can't it make its own APIs? It can't. Making APIs requires a huge and complete upstream chemical industrial chain, countless fine chemical plants, 24-hour stable electricity, clean water resources, and strong environmental processing capabilities. If you try to do heavy chemical industry in India, a country that lacks electricity, water, and an industrial chain, how can you do it? To solve this problem, Modi launched a plan called PLI, using subsidies to encourage local Indian companies to make their own APIs. The result? It turned into a carnival of subsidy fraud. Indian pharmaceutical companies took the government subsidies, then found that there was no supporting chemical raw materials domestically. The cost of making it themselves was double the price of buying from China. So they secretly continued to import from China, just changed the label and claimed it was domestic. So India's pharmaceutical industry is essentially no different from India's version of iPhones. It's just reprocessing on top of Chinese raw materials, earning a bit of processing fees. This model might have made some hard-earned money in the past, but now it doesn't work. The crisis in the Middle East has caused oil prices to soar, shipping costs to rise. The raw materials shipped from China to India naturally become more expensive. These increased costs are squeezing India's already thin margins. They used to make some profit, now they're losing money. What's the right solution at this point? Lower tariffs on Chinese goods, reduce trade barriers, improve relations with China, and hope that China can bear some of the costs. But Modi, this master of winning narratives, how could he admit his dependence on China? To cover up economic problems, Modi has been fanning the flames of nationalism like crazy in recent years. Instead of easing tensions with China, he desperately promotes trade protectionism. He constantly conducts tax audits on Chinese companies, seizes assets, or suddenly raises import tariffs on Chinese goods. The result? He shoots himself in the foot. Once tariffs go up, the cost of manufacturing in India skyrockets. Profit margins shrink even more, and the foreign exchange India can earn becomes even smaller. The second pillar, remittances. Recently, the movie Letters to My Mother has been very popular. It also revealed a key channel for China's foreign exchange in the early days of the country, remittances. Overseas Chinese sent foreign exchange back home, which was exchanged into RMB for use in China. The country could then use those foreign currencies to buy things on the international market. With China's economic development, remittances have actually faded from the stage of China's foreign exchange sources. But in India, remittances are still one of the main sources of foreign exchange. Just from remittances alone, India gets $130 billion in foreign exchange every year. It's the only country in the world to break the $100 billion mark. Don't underestimate this money. This money is pure net foreign exchange inflow, with no import costs. So this money is the anchor of India's foreign exchange reserves. It's also why India, though poor, can splash cash on the global arms market. But what's behind the remittances? It's the blood and tears of India's underlying laborers. If you've been to Dubai, you'll notice that behind the tall buildings and the wealth and luxury, there are countless dark-skinned Indian laborers. They work in the scorching heat, doing heavy physical labor like construction, transport, and sewer cleaning. They save every dollar they earn and send it back to their families in India. According to incomplete statistics, there are nearly 10 million Indian laborers just in the Gulf countries. They generate $54 billion in foreign exchange reserves for India every year. But now, this pillar of foreign exchange is also about to collapse. First, in the US-Iran war, the security environment in the Gulf countries has been hit hard. Especially in financial and tourism cities like Abu Dhabi and Dubai, foreigners are fleeing, so the demand for laborers has dropped significantly. Second, in recent years, as India has gotten closer to Israel, a large number of Indians have been exposed as spies for Israel. This has directly caused Gulf countries to distrust India, and they have started to expel Indian laborers. According to data released by Indian media, in 2023, over 11,000 Indians were asked to leave Saudi Arabia. In 2025, more than 7,000. Just from March to April this year, over 200,000 Indian laborers lost their jobs or were repatriated. By May, the number of returnees had exceeded 1 million. With Indian laborers being sent back, not only does the Indian government have to solve their employment problems, but most importantly, the remittances that India desperately needs will also be greatly reduced. According to Indian media statistics, India's remittance income is expected to drop by 12 to 20% this year. Hundreds of billions of dollars in foreign exchange revenue gone just like that. Third, the dimensionality reduction attack of AI. In the past, Indians were always proud of being the world's only IT powerhouse. But interestingly, such an IT powerhouse has not produced a single globally renowned software company or internet company. Why? Because Indians do outsourcing. They do other people's work. Companies like Tata Consultancy, Infosys, and Wipro almost handle all the dirty and low-end work in the back offices of Wall Street banks and Silicon Valley giants. Why is India's software outsourcing so developed? In a word, cheap labor. The 1990s and 2000s were a boom period for information technology. Western IT giants needed a huge number of programmers and customer service reps. India happened to have a large number of college graduates who knew English and had very low labor costs. So the two sides hit it off. They would take a job that an American would do for $100 an hour and hire 10 Indian college students for $5 an hour each. One side saved money. The other side made money. Everyone was happy. The work Indians did was mostly code writing, manual testing, data entry, routine system maintenance, and transnational customer service. Most of these jobs don't require much technical skill, just a lot of people who are cheap. Over time, India has captured over 65% of the global software outsourcing market. The industry scale is as high as $350 billion, contributing more than 30% of India's foreign exchange income. But as the saying goes, success comes from outsourcing, and failure comes from outsourcing too. IT outsourcing and customer service are indeed high income and decent jobs. But the problem is, because they are so standardized, they are also the most easily replaced by AI. So with the arrival of the AI era, India is the most impacted. In the past, programmers needed to be proficient in grammar, debugging environments, and optimizing algorithms. Now, AI can automatically handle the entire process from code generation to system maintenance. So why would big companies keep so many high-salaried programmers? Silicon Valley has already started taking action. Microsoft laid off 15,000 people. Intel laid off 21,000, Amazon laid off 14,000, and Meta laid off 8,000 in just 1 month in May. If they are cutting their own people, what about Indians thousands of miles away? Big companies do the math. In the past, a project outsourced to India would require 100 Indian programmers to slog away for half a year, costing millions of dollars. And they had to put up with a typical Indian slowness and communication issues. But now, they just need to buy a set of AI software development agents, pair it with 2 or 3 US system architects, and in a few days, they can produce more perfect code at less than 1/10 the cost of Indian labor. So what does that mean for Indian programmers? It's a disaster. At the Indian AI Impact Summit in February this year, top Silicon Valley venture capital guru Vinod Khosla made a prediction. India's IT services and business process outsourcing companies will almost completely disappear within the next 5 years. By 2030, this industry will cease to exist. What does the disappearance of the outsourcing industry mean? It means that India's 6 million middle-class people will lose their livelihood. It also means that India's annual foreign exchange revenue of up to $200 billion will go to zero. Foreign exchange revenue is decreasing, but the places where foreign exchange is spent are not decreasing at all. Can India stop buying oil? Can it stop buying industrial and pharmaceutical raw materials? Can it stop buying fertilizer? Can it stop buying fighter jets? Can it stop repaying foreign debt? Where will India get the money for all this? The day India runs out of foreign exchange will truly be Modi's doomsday. In recent years, there's been a saying internationally. China is getting old, supply chains are shifting, And India will rely on its huge young population dividend to take over from China and become the next world factory. Is this statement reliable? Completely unreliable. Because population and population dividend are two completely different things. Just because you have a lot of people doesn't mean you have a population dividend. If having many people were a dividend, the number one power in the 19th century would not have been Britain, but China. How did China's population dividend explode? It came through bloody land reforms that broke feudal personal dependence, through selling everything to build a heavy industrial system, through several generations of hard work and endurance to improve infrastructure and universal education. In the end, they endured countless hardships and suffered countless wrongs before finally reaping the reward. Has India gone through any of this? None of it. India has not had a revolution, has not carried out any thorough land reform, has not broken the caste system. The underlying masses don't even have basic literacy or work discipline. How can such a country do Make in India? Indians are very naive. They naively believe that in the global division of labor, a country can skip the sweatshops, environmental pollution, heavy chemical industry, and capital accumulation, and directly rely on assembly plants, services outsourcing, and financial liberalization to become a developed country. This creates a huge contrast. The underlying in India is still a modern version of a serfdom society with no productivity at all. But the upper comprador class and so-called IT middle class have prematurely integrated into the US dollar system, enjoying consumption demands synchronized with the West. On the surface, things look great. But behind this, Indians have overlooked one problem. A country without a huge homegrown industrial system that forcibly matches modern consumption desires will inevitably become a foreign exchange black hole. Every hard-earned penny they earn will eventually be wasted on luxury goods, energy, high-end consumer products, and even gold bars, with no way to form any reproduction of industrial capital. In the past few years, India was able to maintain its superficial prosperity, not because its economic model was any good, but because the West gave India a very high geopolitical premium in order to contain China. But after the air battle in May, the external environment changed dramatically. India suddenly realized that its prosperity was like a castle in the air, a sandcastle on the beach. The rise of a latecomer country is always built on steel, chemicals, and highly skilled industrial workers. These things cannot be bought, cannot be stolen, and cannot be bypassed. Every time you slack off in this process, it will eventually come back to you tenfold or 100-fold in another form. A comprador country that has never undergone land reform, never built a heavy industrial system, and relies entirely on doing low-end OEM work for others, exporting bottom-level labor, and doing dirty and low-end jobs, will never, ever, ever truly become a superpower. The illusion of skipping hard industrial growth never ends well. Real power is built on steel and sweat, not just service jobs and foreign cash. If you like this, hit subscribe for more stories like this.